Approximately 95% of the non-organic produce that is consumed have been found to have at least trace amounts of pesticides in them. What foods are they? What can a health conscious person do about that? Well, the Environmental Work Group just released its annual Clean 15 Dirty Dozen list. So let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David, holistic pediatrician, functional medicine doctor, somebody who for many, many years has been concerned about the amount of toxins that we are being exposed to, whether it's the air that we breathe, the medicines that we take, the food that we eat, the fact that many people have issues with detoxifying in the first place. My goodness, that is really what the basis of much of my practice is based upon. Now, of course, in my never-ending goal of trying to educate people, I want to put information out like this. And of course, we would love for you to share this with other people so that they are aware of it as you are now, if you weren't already. Although I'm guessing some of you have been well aware of these issues, but it's good to have a refresher. Okay, now today we're going to be talking about the different types of pesticides that are out there, what the concerns are, and what can be done about it. Okay, now first of all, there are different types of pesticides that are what are called insecticides. So those are specifically ones that kill insects. Herbicides, those that kill weeds and things like that. Fungicides, those that kill fungi, molds. This is something that's becoming bigger. In fact, the number of products of pesticides that are now being looked at and that are being newly introduced to our society, to our food source, are fungicides. Okay, now, why are there concerns about this in the first place? Well, despite the fact that we don't hear about this very much, pesticides have been associated with preterm birth, congenital malformations such as neural tube defects, spontaneous abortions, an increase in genetic damage, lower sperm counts, heart disease, cancers, and other disorders. So, kind of a bit, right? Things that we've been trying to talk about avoiding all along. Now, in terms of the exposures, and obviously there are some dose dependent aspects of things, farm workers who are exposed to pesticides are at highest risk, nearly 5 times as likely to see DNA damage compared to people who are not farm workers. Children who are exposed at an early age showed poor neurodevelopment and from infancy to adolescence. And this does seem as if those who live closer to agriculture fields. So it's stuff, it's in the air. What are they spraying, right? We've seen these crop dusters fly by. So there are exposures that are happening to people even if they're not eating it, but just by living or working around it. That's sad. Okay, so now in terms of the Environmental Work Group, so every year, now the 2024 list is out, and it's the shopper's guide to pesticides in produce. Okay, so there are other foods out there that that are not produce, that are not part of this list, so it doesn't exonerate all non-organic, non-produce foods. But still, this is what they're actually checking. This is an annual list. They've been doing it for 20 years now. Something I have saved as a bookmark. We'll call upon it all the time. Okay. Now they break it down into 2 lists. There's the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are the 12 products that have the highest amount of pesticides, the most concerning. Whereas the Clean 15, if you're not able to do organic, these are the conventional non-organic produce that have the least and maybe even no pesticide residues that are found, okay? And we've put the list for both the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. You can even click on there to get the entire list of all produce and vegetables, but all that information is linked to right there in the show description below if you want to see it. Now, in terms of the Dirty Dozen list from the Environmental Work Group, so these are the top 5 absolute worst conventional non-organic produce. Strawberries, spinach, greens such as kale, collard, or mustard greens, grapes number 4, and peaches number 5. Okay, and you'll notice it's interesting because some things like strawberries are grown on the earth, grapes on a vine, peaches in a tree, right? So it's not just is it the root system, but they're just more likely to just have it in them. Whether it's different spraying practices, like strawberries, they're almost like sponges. Maybe they just suck it up more, or more difficult to get rid of it. Obviously, strawberries have have those little pits within them, so maybe it's harder to clean it out from there. But obviously, other things like grapes, they're smooth, right? Why is it showing up there? Now, the Clean 15 list from the Environmental Work Group. And now, nearly 65% of the fruits and vegetables that were in on this group here had no detectable pesticides whatsoever. So, again, these are the non organic foods. But the top five are avocado, sweet corn, and then we're obviously you can have conversations of GMOs. That's not what we're talking here. We're specifically talking pesticides. But after sweet corn, pineapple, onions, and papaya. So there's a list. But again, the full list, again, these are the top five of each, but obviously the Dirty Dozen by definition has 12. The Clean 15 has 15 of them, so you want to consult the list, but those are the biggie pluses, the biggie no's. Now, how are the products themselves actually tested? So this is actually something done by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And of course, when they find something toxic enough, pesticides enough, or E. coli for that matter, that's what calls for a recall. But of course, our goal would be to avoid exposing ourselves to something before it's been recalled, right? We want to know ahead of time and what we can make the choices as to what we put into our body. Okay, but what the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, so they would scrub the fruits and vegetables, and peel them and scrub them just the way that people would normally do them. So they're not just pulling it off the tree; they're actually preparing it in such a way that the way humans do that. Okay. Then they check for 254 different pesticides, and the results are posted online. And of course, if there's something really high, then there'll be a recall on that. But just because something's not high enough, it's a cumulative thing also. So we don't want to be exposing ourselves to more toxins than are absolutely necessary. Now, the Environmental Work Group looked at 47,510 different samples of 46 non-organic fruits and vegetables. And they found traces of all of those pesticides in all fruits and vegetables that they analyzed. 209 of those were in the Dirty Dozen list. Okay, so some of them they may be traced here, traced there, but the Dirty Dozen, remember how there's like the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, but 46 all over. So some of them were found in some of those other ones, but 209 of the 256 were commonly found in the Dirty Dozen. And here's another thing. Pesticides that have been banned by the government for years continue to show up in the produce. So the Environmental Work Group report actually gave an example of in green beans. There's traces of something called acephate. This is a toxic pesticide that was banned by the EPA over 10 years ago, yet it's still showing up. All right, so what are we to do about this? Now, by all means, the call of this is not to stop eating fruits and vegetables. We need to eat fruits and vegetables. They're still healthier, obviously, relative to eating. And we've talked a lot about meats and processed meats and ultra processed foods. It's not like we have a relative, like how bad is the pesticides comparing to all of those things? We want to make good choices. We want to be able to just minimize toxic exposure, negative exposures as much as we can. Of course, eat organic as much as possible. Now, I realize that availability as well as cost can make this prohibitive for a lot of people. I get it, okay? But of course, what they have found that the studies have shown that if a person changes over to an organic diet, for their produce, it can drop the amount of pesticides that appear in the people's urine by 95%. So that's huge. Almost a complete removal of pesticides, at least being excreted from the body, which will tell you what's going in because you pee it out, when a person goes organic. Okay? And now this, of course, is especially true for the Dirty Dozen. So that would make sense that if we have to be selective with which organic foods that we use, that we do the ones that are in the Dirty Dozen in particular, but maybe especially in those top 5, top 10 of the Clean 15, even them, that if we can't get those as organic, it sounds like it's not nearly as concerning. Okay. Now, these are some examples that are other things that we can do this is according to the Environmental Work Group. Number 1, clean your fruits and vegetables from before eating it to try to remove as much of the pesticide residue as possible. Now, they do note no washing method is 100% to get rid of it all, but it can make a big difference. Okay. But again, washing and rubbing the produce under running water. They're saying to do it under running water and letting it go off as opposed to soaking it. So soaking it is not as good as rinsing it off. Okay. They're also saying not to use soap, detergents, or some of the commercial scrubs and other things like that. There's been no proof that actually works. I trust the environmental work group because they've been so on top of this. So, I can understand, other people, trying to poo poo a lot of the things that we do. But if the environmental work group is saying this, I give them the benefit of the doubt about that. But then they also say dry the produce off with a clean cloth or paper towel, dry, to try to absorb more of the liquids that are coming off. And of course, they'll get some additional bacteria. But of course, if there's still some on there by drying it off, you can absorb some of that moisture so that you're not putting it into your body. Okay, so again, something very nice for us to be reviewing. How do we keep as safe as possible? Let me know what your thoughts are about this. How able are you able to be with being organic or being mindful of these things? How important is this to you in the first place? And again, please share this information, subscribe to this YouTube channel, hit us up on our other social media platforms. Join us on our Patreon where we get information to people that just our patients can otherwise get. But share the information more than anything. We really want to get as much of this information out there as possible so that we can educate as many people as possible. Have a great day.